Hello and welcome to Charch Chat. I'm Paul Charchian from LeagueSafe.com. Thanks for joining us here at Open Sports. Today I want to talk about the second half of my top 10 wide receivers for 2009, ideal for fantasy leaguers and dynasty leagues, keeper leagues, or anybody who's just kind of interested in 2009 already, like I am. Of course, I'll give the old caveat I do at the beginning of all of these that things could change, and they will change, but even with free agency and draft, most of these guys are pretty solid, and I think this is gonna hold pretty firm. So let's dive right in. The top five were, as a reminder, Fitzgerald, Jennings, Andre Johnson, Randy Moss, and Calvin Johnson. So that was your top five. Some notable names not in there, and we'll talk about some of them in the rest of the top 10, and some that didn't make it into the top 10 as well. All right, let's begin with number 6. Steve Smith, one of my favorite players in the NFL. Beatings aside, you might be a little surprised to see him even this high. I think some people are going to have him lower. He finished number 1 overall at yards per game. He was the only wide receiver in the NFL to top an average of 100 yards per game. So he missed those first 2 games. So he didn't actually finish number 1 in total yards for the season because of the 2-game suspension, but he finished number 1 in yards per game. Put up 1,421 yards, scored only 6 touchdowns though, and that's a lot of why you're going to see him misranked, I believe. So people don't see him as much of a touchdown threat. I don't think that's the case at all. His 6 touchdowns, the lowest since 2002, not counting the lost 2004 season where he blew out his knee and then it was a lost season. So aside from that, he's been a pretty good, not great, touchdown scorer, and he's just a fantastic yardage guy and also a really good distance scoring threat because he's so powerful and fast after the catch. Finished this season really well. In 5 of the last 6 games, he put up over 100 total yards. I like that about Steve Smith. His 18.2 yards per catch was the best of any receiver that had at least 50 receptions this year. And so you know what you're getting with Steve Smith. Big play guy, game-changing guy, potential for gigantic games. The touchdown numbers, not always huge, but the yards numbers are always big in that Panther offense, that now that they've got this really good running game, you're going to see the passing game loosen up a lot, and he's just going to be a dynamite threat. And I'm not worried about Jake Delhomme. I know some of you are going to, that last thing that we saw of Jake Delhomme was a 6-turnover game in the playoffs, but Jake Delhomme has proven himself to be a good enough quarterback to get him the ball. Number 7 is Reggie Wayne. Almost universally, the number 1 or 2, no worse than number 3 wide receiver last year, but what a strange and inexplicably bad season Reggie Wayne had. So he drops from number 1 all the way to number 7, and some people are going to have him even lower. Let's look at his season. He had 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's the 6 touchdowns that are a real head-scratcher here, and this despite the fact that Marvin Harrison's role was scaled way, way, way back, so you'd think this would have been a prime opportunity. That's a lot of why I liked him so much, and I had him as my number 1 wide receiver over Randy Moss coming into the season. It's because you figured with Harrison's role diminishing that he would step up and that passing offense would really go through him, but he ended up having really the same kind of numbers he had all the way back in 2005. He really diminished, both in yardage and touchdowns. He really regressed by a few seasons of development. It was very disappointing. Just 2 touchdowns in the final 11 games. So that was bad, and just 4 100-yard games all season. Still, Peyton Manning's his quarterback. Marvin Harrison will be that much further removed and maybe even be off the team, which I wouldn't surprise me at all. And so I expect him to be better next season from a fantasy perspective, and maybe even great. So I'm keeping him at number 7 despite a very lackluster, disappointing 2008. My number 8 wide receiver is Roddy White. Roddy White, who had the great chemistry this season with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, of course, will only get better as time goes on. And, he comes through the season 4th overall with just shy of 1,400 yards. Now, he had 7 touchdowns, a little lower than I'd like for, especially if you've got 1,400 yards. I think you find the end zone a few more times. But he did have 6 100-yard games, and nice, he only had 2 games with less than 50 yards all year, and so he didn't have a lot of clunkers where he really hurt your team in a material way. And just as Matt Ryan develops and as Michael Turner remains there as a significant rushing threat, I just see good things for Roddy White in his future. And you got to figure that with Ryan there and Roddy White still is a young guy, just the progression, the evolution. I think we're going to be hearing a lot about Ryan to White. I mean, it's going to be a huge hookup for a long time. All right, let's go to number 9. That's Marcus Colston. This is another guy who has had a disappointing season. I really expected a monster year this year, but the thumb injury in week 1 really derailed him all the way to week 9's bye. He came out of week 9, and then 10 through 16, those final games were really strong for him. From 10 to 16 forward, he had only 2 games in which he did not either score or put up 100 yards. And so really happy with the way he finished the season. And with Drew Brees there, you have to figure that there's going to be also a pass-heavy offense, and he's the most consistent guy. Lance Moore fell off the table. Once Colston really reasserted himself, Lance Moore, who had put up big numbers through the middle of the season, really did nothing. And so I'm back on the Colston bandwagon. I'm back for more abuse from him if that's what it's going to be. I think he does come back nicely here. Number 10, Anquan Boldin. There's tons of question marks about him, but he is the best wide receiver in the NFL after the catch. He runs like a running back after the catch. And let's remember, he finished the season hurt and dinged up. In the playoffs, he was hurt and wasn't really a factor. And Larry Fitzgerald really stood out. But remember that Anquan Boldin, through about week 10 or 11, even with the jaw injury and everything and the broken face, he was fantasy football's best wide receiver for a lot of last season. Put up 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns in 11 games. 11 touchdowns in 11 games is really good. And so I certainly like that part. And the downside here with Boldin right now is the history of the injuries that knock him out for a couple of games. He doesn't have the big injury that ends the season, but he gets these nagging injuries that slow him down for a few games or will cause him to miss a couple of games here and there. Those are the things that worry you. And then there's the new contract. He wants to be paid something closer to what Larry Fitzgerald is getting paid. And he's undervalued right now, and he is underpaid right now. That could end up changing the team he's on, and obviously that will change his ranking, maybe for the better if he goes to the right place. So Anquan Boldin is number 10. Coming up tomorrow, I will talk about some of the names that aren't in the top 10. Where are some of your favorite guys? I know what you're thinking. Where are some of these guys that you like a lot? I'll tell you why they didn't crack the top 10 when we come back tomorrow as we wrap up our discussion of 2009 wide receivers. So take a look for that video. If you have any questions for our fantasy staff here, send us an email, fantasy@opensports.com.
Think you can complete the drive? Play today and get an automatic entry to win daily prizes, 2 tickets to the big game, and a brand new car. Start your drive today at opensports.com.